Leah Suárez is a musician and arts entrepreneur whose primary instrument is her rich velvet voice. She talks to me about how her voice has impacted so many people in Charleston's jazz community for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Leah Suárez, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much, Quintin. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, likewise. Obviously, you are a notable musician and an arts entrepreneur whose primary instrument is obviously your velvet rich voice. What type of instrument that is you're playing these days?
Well, I'm still playing my voice, which is my primary instrument. I actually my instrument that I was trained on is the euphonium, which is a tenor tuba. And I have a valve trombone here where I am now in Mexico. So I play on that as well. And I have my keyboard. So I when I'm writing, especially, that's what I use.
What are you writing these days?
These days, well, a lot of it, in these times, especially with COVID and our pandemic that we've been living in, and this new normal, it's given me as an artist the time to reflect. So I've been taking ideas that have been swirling for literally years, and working them out as I can. You know, sometimes that means just being in nature and letting it come and flow. And sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's melody, sometimes it's putting lyrics and melody together. So for me, it's about reconnecting with that flow, that creative process. I've been working on a movie, actually, a documentary called Durga, and with my friend Kenny Lyon. He's based in LA. And so that's been fun to also just explore in that realm of storytelling. So I've enjoyed that process.
What is the creative process generally for you?
Well, that can vary, right? Again, it can be being in nature. I'm very inspired by nature. Being a Charlestonian Mexican American, I miss the sea. That's the one thing I do miss. Not being close to the sea right now in this past year and a half. This is the longest I've been without the sea. But I have found my other sea in the forests here, in the nature, ironically cooking. I think anyone who knows me would say that that's probably not my forte, but I've actually feel like I've grown in this past year and a half in that aspect. And so that creatively has been literally a fire that has come out, and I've really just enjoyed the process of that. So breaking in a new molcajete to make salsas, or just to enjoy the process. So creatively, I think that sometimes it's about everything else than sitting and writing. It's about the conversations you're having, the exploration of books or magazines or research. Sometimes it's just meditating and listening, or doing yoga or walking or forest bathing.
Oh, yeah.
So
that is amazing. And over the past year and a half, Leah, what else have you been reflecting on?
Life in general. I think the idea of home. One of my main projects is Sacred Ground, Tierra Sagrada, and that was originally dedicated to those who experienced and witnessed and lived, and unfortunately those who we lost in this plane to Mother Emanuel and to that massacre. And so I was deeply affected at that time, and discovered that piece and those reflections then are very relevant now. And so I've been exploring more there, to the idea of sacred ground and really what is home for any one of us, as human beings, and what is our responsibility in that, and what is our I think our responsibility to the gifts in which we're given. So to me, I'm just a vessel, right? You're a vessel for whatever God or spirit and universe, and however you're moved in that space. And so I've been reflecting a lot on that, and that's come out, I think, coming out more and more creatively, and how I live my life.
And thank God for creating the universe in the name of Jesus Christ. He is my Lord and Savior. So thank God for
Amen. Amen. Amen.
So what is the biggest difference from 2015 to right now when you think of the Emanuel massacre?
Wow. Awareness, right? I think visibility, awareness, and consciousness. There's a collective consciousness that's more present. It's less in the shadows, right? Like now we're having to literally deal with, I think, the things that we've buried, tried to bury, the seeds that were buried that are now growing, to make these massive changes. I think these are things we have to reckon with and reconcile. And for that reconciliation, pardon me, the light is so beautiful and also so strong.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm gonna.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Quintin.
No worries at all. Okay, I can start over. I'll take it from the top. So from 2015 to right now, what is the difference between the Mother Emanuel massacre and the current issues of today socially?
I think socially, we're dealing with a creative consciousness that is now present and here in this time and space that we didn't have access to or wasn't ready to quite. We saw the effects, but we didn't necessarily feel them. We weren't ready to digest that, I think. I think it was a very surface level reaction, in my opinion. And I think now what we're dealing with is that we're dealing with a consciousness that cannot be ignored. And this is collectively and I think individually. So there's a truth and reconciliation. There's a reckoning. And I think there's a lot of forgiveness and that needs to happen, and a lot of truth dealing directly, and that can be done through the arts. And now we're seeing this beautiful manifestation, I think, of that in these times, especially. So whether everything happens in perfect timing, I'm a believer of that. And what I know is that these real powerful events, they happen, and then there are waves and waves and waves of consciousness revealing, and at those points they intersect and they weave, and then all of a sudden we're unable to see that beautiful tapestry until the end, right? But maybe we never get there, but we're able to see those steps along the way. So I think the difference between 2015 and 2021 socially is that I think now we can't ignore it, and now we're digesting it and embodying those changes. And I think either the truth is here, here it is. These seeds are now blossoming. Here they are. So the we burn the crops, and now it's about tilling the soil and getting back to life and the sprouts. So of whatever's blooming, and we have to deal with whatever that comes, the weeds, the flowers, the fruit, there are tough things and there are beautiful things, and I think that's what we're dealing with now. And the language.
And the language, exactly right. And what are you exactly conscious of now?
Individually?
Yes, ma'am.
I think from an individual perspective, my relationship to identity, my relationship to place and home, and my responsibility within that, with my neighbors, friends, colleagues, community at large, globally, locally, wherever I may be. So for me, that's, I think there's one level of consciousness, there's another level of awakening, and there's another level of action. And that's where, how do we combine those things? So for me personally, I'm deeply aware of my role in that, and how that, as an artist especially, to also, whether it's privilege or lack thereof, depending on where I am and which situations I'm in. So I think also sharing that, right? Like sharing, being able to express that, learn the language, figure it out, and figure out how to have these conversations and ignite these conversations where I feel moved to do so and where I'm called to do so. So even here in Mexico, for instance, we're having the same conversations. They're just in a different way, in a different language, different, quite literally.
Right.
And also, there's also no difference. The global South is the global South. So it's been interesting to see what my perspective there in Charleston brings to this perspective here.
In your role, what other actions are you going to take?
The actions that I am taking are creating and also working within my community to allow those voices to be heard in a way that I can, again, either use my platform to open up the door, or I think I've also been creating a table my whole life, I feel like, so I think part of that is also using my voice and art and platform to raise awareness, to I think give people that, again, that sacred ground to meet in that space, as uncomfortable as it can be sometimes, to just allow that space to be. So I think that's part of my gift, and my purpose for being here, I should say, is to create the space to allow all of these differences to come in and be sort of worked out and sorted out. So in my action, I think sometimes that's inaction, or the action of allowing, of submitting to those spaces, and my role in those spaces, and to, I think, promote, but less promote. I'm trying to find the word for it. Is, I think, just allow, simply allow. Sometimes that's enough to allow that space.
Speaking of sacred ground, Leah, let me ask you, what has been buried musically that's now sprouting out of the ground?
Oh. Well, I think we're seeing that, right? I love seeing my friends, especially in the U.S. and all over the world, really,
yes.
Who are just shining. People like, well, the group Frankie Tanky, right? We've been working together for years, and these are my dear friends and musical family, and I'm just so proud. I'm so proud to see them finally getting their due for that's what's changed, right? Between 2015 and now. I mean, the fact that they can win a Grammy and go on, and that's being identified as important and deserving of this space is just really, in that realm, it's always been important. It's always been, I think, alive and well. Obviously, those seeds have been watered, and they've been working on that for years and years. It didn't just come out of thin air, right? This was not vapor. This is something that is now being appreciated on a more commercial level. Well, that's sometimes what it takes for it to then be appreciated and be supported. I think that's the connection that people need to realize. It's not just them, but my beautiful friends who are working. I mean, Sandrina Dunning is doing amazing things in Charleston, and making sure that work is getting to the forefront. Gino Castillo is doing beautiful things in Charleston. These are things that 10 years ago we were working so hard to just bring or 15 years ago. Now it's crazy to even think about that time flies.
Yes.
We were working so hard to bring Jazz Artists of Charleston and, this like movement, but everything has been in steps and stages, because long before us, there were these seeds that were there too, that, they come in phases. So these are seasons. And I think right now is the time to enjoy these seasons for all my dear friends who are creating powerful work, and their voices are, at least now, they have the light shining on them. Enjoy the light. because there will be a time that comes again, another cycle, and at least that base will be there. You can't say you didn't know,
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So, and I will say, I mean, myself included, I think my time too as an artist, to be the artist, an individual, as a complex identity, someone born in the South of Mexican heritage, and really, that is something that wasn't celebrated there. I didn't feel that in Charleston. I felt I didn't belong here, I didn't belong there, and I'm not from here, I'm not from there. Where do you belong in that? So now I feel the freedom to be me, and to be able to not have to hide or code switch, so to speak. I mean, we're all code switching in so many different ways, but to find that space and carve that space out of myself, and invite that table, and celebrate with my friends, that's the power of these seeds that are now sprouting and what we're seeing today.
And what is that musical base here in Charleston?
That musical base? You mean?
Yeah, I mean, as far as talent, as far as genre, I mean.
Well, Charleston, as you know, and I think your listeners all know, is such a very special place. It is sacred ground. And we can argue that there's sacred ground no matter where you are in any part of the world. But there's something very spiritually igniting about Charleston, and it being one of the first ports for this land that we now call the United States of America. We could argue that point all day long too, or discuss, how we use this language. I think we're now learning how to talk about our own country, if you will, and what that means to each and every one of us. But Charleston, as a port city, especially, as one of the first cities in the United States, and founded on such a beautiful mess, I will say. I mean, it's complicated. It's complex, our identity there. But there is one thing for sure. The Gullah roots in Charleston, they have gone nowhere. They are there. They are strong, and they've only gotten stronger. Because now, again, I feel like there's this celebration of, and it's not just now. I mean, you have people like O.C. Chandler,
Yes,
who's been doing this work, and he is a mentor and has just, he changed the landscape for bringing that. There's so many people. I mean, I could list off an enormous amount of people. Karen Chandler, who
Right.
is not from Charleston, but of Charleston. She's right there at CFC, right?
Right.
I mean, you're talking about people who have come, even someone like Trevor Weston, who came and actually, he's from the Caribbean, Bayesian heritage. I mean, there's a strong connection there. You have people like Herb Frazier,
Right.
and all these people who are just critical and have been critical to our city
Yes.
and our state. And now I think we're finding that musical base, it's only now the light is shining between it, we call it, it being one of the cradles of jazz. I mean, we can see this music predates, this is what we're looking at, the birthplace of an identity, not just jazz, but the American identity. What does that mean when you have African tradition? When you have Native American tradition and influences, whether we know it or not. We very much know now the history of Gullah and Native American traditions, and even, our African traditions, West African traditions specifically, and in colonialization, that of many different, between instruments and artistic access and all of those things. I mean, I think all of that is to be celebrated. I'm sitting here in Mexico City, in one of the most complex places you could imagine, and it's very relatable. Here they're celebrating, it's 500 years of colonization. We're talking about it. I'm sitting in Tenochtitlan, an ancient city. I mean, ancient city that was covered in pavement. It was all water, and now we're talking about, it's that same idea. You can't take away the things that were buried. You can't, those things will eventually sprout. And Charleston is ripe for that. And whether we have floods and rising tides and all the water and everything else. But I think that's a very powerful image too, is that you can't ignore the water there and you can't ignore what's buried, and because it won't be buried long.
One of those critical people of Charleston that we still respect and revere, even though he's passed on, is your friend and mentor, Jack McCrae, whom I actually knew very well as well when he worked at the Post and Courier. And he said this about you, quote, "Leah is a vocalist in touch with all facets of American music, especially jazz. She sings in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, and conveys truth and honesty in her music."
Jack. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, he's a special person, always will be. I'm thinking of him in these days, and Tommy Gill, actually one of my other mentors who passed on as well early on. We lost a lot of good people, but they're always with us. And Jack had a special way. He taught me a lot, and he took me under his wing. He taught all of us so much, and that was his purpose here. I think he's one of those elders that never leaves, and I call on him all the time. I have a picture of him here, and I think, and I talk to him. He's somebody who just is with us, and I think he's just shining. He's smiling from above at all that's happening with respect to everyone who's involved with Ranky Tanky, to Charleston Jazz Orchestra, to everything that he built in this base. Ebony City Soccer Club.
Right. I'm
on the board of that organization too. We're working hard to also, again, an organization that's been around for 40 years. Now is its time to find its support, and people are finally listening. So I find with Jack, he had such a special way of bringing people together and disarming them to understand the differences and understand their privilege and understand also how to move forward. So I think more than anything, what I learned from him off the stage, especially, was how to do just that, or a portion of that, my role in that, right? And he very much respected women. I will say that. As a woman in this industry, it's not easy, and in any regard. And he lifted his women around, and I say that, his women, I say the women who were co-producing, co-writing, those were his partners in the not only the music, but I think in the life he was living and the work he was doing. And it was very powerful to see. He and Karen Chandler were like this, and they still are, yes. And myself and Jack and many others, Barbara Burgess. He just had this long list. He had an impressive community of people he also lifted, and who lifted him along the way. And that's what it's about, this give and receive, share, and find ways to use your voice and your platform to give to others and to the next generation. We're all here for a very short amount of time, right? None of us know, but we have the power to use it, to be this vessel, and to shine our lights and be the purpose that we are.
Absolutely. And what type of jazz music would he be listening to today?
Everything. Oh, that man loved everything. I think he would even take, because of the language and how it's changed, I think he would even say it's whether it's Black American music, he would say. I think jazz has been commercialized in a lot of ways as a genre, but I think he also appreciated that. I think he had he knew that was important, while also respecting the intellectual identity of something, right? So he understood the history of it. He also knew the importance of the marketing, and also the telling the history of where something comes from. So for him, he liked to say that improvisation is to improve upon. So what do I think Jack would be listening to today? He'd love to hear what Ranky Tanky are working on, really propelling. They're not just playing spiritual Gullah traditional music. They're playing music that is also rooted very deeply in jazz and improvisation and their own voices. So I'm so thrilled to hear, to see my friend Kiana talking on ETV with Xavier Blake and Charlton talking about what they're writing. That's the point. Or Etienne Charles, who's working on incredible projects and whom Jack really respected because of his Caribbean roots,
right?
While also understanding the diaspora and understanding his role in that. So I think all of that, he would be listening to all of it. He'd be excited for Lee Barber, and
Yes.
he'd be excited for and Robert Lewis and all these people who are creating, who are just making that magic happen by doing what they do and being influenced by it all. He was always on the cutting edge, and I think he'd also be saying an amen to Gil Scott-Heron these times. I feel like the revolution now is televised. Yes. so we've got this reckoning, and I think he'd be right up in it, just like he was. He was someone who literally survived and lived through the Orangeburg massacre. Yeah. He'd be proud of Adam Parker, I think, who's now taken on that role at the Post and Courier of writing about and telling these stories. And that was a dear friend of his too, who he was just everyone at the Post and Courier, really. Marcus Amaker and Nathan Durfee, who have just launched this new book. I mean, I could go on and on and on about our community that is just so powerfully now blooming into its own. I can hardly wait to come back for Spoleto and see Rhiannon Giddens with her new work. Omar, I think that it's just such a powerful piece that I think will also enlighten not just our Charleston crowd, but Spoleto and in general. So my hope is that we get there. Is that we work together to get there safely and healthfully, and that we see each other next year.
Absolutely. And what will be that intellectual identity about jazz in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think there's a lot of conversation right now around, Black American music, the identity of the United States as a country, its position in the global identity of jazz. I'm really, when we started Jazz Artists of Charleston, there was no International Jazz Day that was proclaimed by UNESCO. So now there is. So I'm excited to see what that all brings. I mean, Herbie Hancock's on the forefront of that. Wayne Shorter. Esperanza Spalding is now writing this opera with Wayne Shorter that is really, we're talking about classical music that is improvised upon and upon, because these are complex harmonies, complex pieces, complex. When you talk about the intellectualization of an art form, you don't want to. I think they're just different levels. Each art form has those different levels. Not one is better than the other. I think we have to remember that the feeling is what's most important. Sure. And I think right now, jazz is important globally. I'm embedded in this community here too, in Mexico, and really just globally thanks to technology. Yes. And I'm so excited to see what's available now. Now there are schools for jazz, and I was on the early onset of jazz studies at College of Charleston, but it's nothing like it is now. You're talking about now there's access worldwide to worldwide rhythms, to indigenous rhythms and instruments and language. And the power of that, I think the flexibility that jazz gives it really is that universal language. It just really is. And so I'm excited to see in the next 5 to 10 years how the evolution of our art form comes to be, and how it changes, and its role in the revolution socially, just as it has been all this time. It was very much a strong. It's always been a part of the revolution. Absolutely.
And if they were to ask you to become a professor here at the College of Charleston, what would be that course title for your class?
Wow. It's somewhere between. That's a great question, Quintin. I'll have to think on that, but I would say, somewhere maybe maybe it would be sacred ground, the roots of all things, no? And finding the intersection of language, identity, and music between us all. So I think that would be my course.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously, you're a multilingual singer, a trombonist, a composer, and a band leader, blazing your own cool alloy genre that's jazz tempered with a range of other root traditions. What root traditions are actually popular today?
Well, I think we're all taking a strong look at African traditions. Of course, I think there's now acknowledgement of that, but I'm excited to also see indigenous root music, like rooted music, coming to the forefront. I'm so inspired by these brass bands here in Oaxaca, for example. That lights up my soul. You know, it really reminds me of something like the brass bands of Jenkins Orphanage.
Right.
They're not far from each other. I mean, when I hear that, I hear the swing in theirs too, or it's just that swing in and of itself. We can find it in all traditions. Doing this music for Durga, I did some research on on specific music to Nepal and India, and it was just so fascinating to me to dive down that rabbit hole now. And I just think that's the celebration now, is that we have access to that and the rooted traditions of, then what do we do with that? You know, again, in the Americas, and that's what's so complex. And because we're dealing with the mixture, the mestiza of it, or the Creole of it, and even those words and how we use that language, we have to figure out where the line is. You know, are we deconstructing to reconstruct? Are we decolonizing to, that's very popular right now, is this idea of decolonization, how we use it in our cooking, in our language, in our expression, gender. Here in Mexico, we have 20 some odd genders that are, to indigenous, whatever, that are really inspired by, I think, those, again, indigenous traditions. So I think finding the common ground in all of that is what jazz does, and that's a vessel to do it. And the roots traditions, we just now have access to it. I mean, the things that you can now see in libraries across the world and hear for recorded field recordings, it's impressive. And someone who I think I've been really impressed too with, like, Clay Ross, who's a part of Ranky Tanky. He's played with many different groups. He respects those roots traditions and understands the value of also not just taking them, which I think has been a real popular notion over years and years and years. That's the idea of colonization. But now we're talking about taking it a step further, giving the voice to the voices from which it comes, and respecting your role in that and place in that. So that too is important. Learning the language, finding it, learning it, and then figuring out how to give it power, to empower it.
As a matter of fact, you said this quote, as tenacious as she is, obviously on your website saying this, about honoring and preserving what has come before and fostering the creativity of now. Leah is most brilliantly, I can't pronounce it, brilliantly lit by her own love for performing and bringing people together through the power of music. What's the creativity now, and what's the creativity of later?
The creativity now, personally, or what do we?
Personally and musically. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the creativity of now. I can't really say for later, right? I think I'll be inspired when I'm inspired. I can say for right now, the creativity is integration deeply with my own identity. I had to come to terms with a lot of things. And musically, I felt like I was 3 different people. Personally, I felt like I was maybe 5 different people, and all of those people are me. For instance, it's different when I hear my name, Leah Suárez, here, and that's no offense to anyone at all. it's me embracing those parts of myself to have that freedom. So I think the creativity lies in the freedom to just be who you are, and that changes from day to day. Who I wake up as tomorrow will change from who I am today, talking to you now. And will the core of me change? I mean, quite possibly. I don't know what's going to change me. I do know that what I do know is that every significant factor in my life has contributed to this moment of where I am as a creative being. And I have that, I feel like my purpose in this world is to take that and to just live my life and walk through this life as a creative being. So, in 5 years, I can see myself traveling the world again and and creating with all types of different people from all over the world. And I'm doing that now just from my own place. I mean, I literally just moved into my apartment here after I've been living with my gypsy life for a long time. And, I just have days here, and it feels so good to know that I can connect with you and this is creativity, right? Yes. You're inspiring me in so many ways, and it's such a blessing. I just can't, it kind of blows my mind that I can also talk to my friend who's in South Africa, and he's creating this beautiful work of art, and we're talking about how to work together. And so it doesn't limit us. I think we have to find ways to be creative in that. And I think, again, what the future holds, I can hardly wait to see. I think it's bright and beautiful.
Beautiful. Who do you want to work with musically next?
I think that will come, I'm not going to push those things. I would love to work with someone like Etienne Charles, or, it's always been a dream. I think we have, it would be interesting to see how that would flow. I just think that would come. I don't think I've met yet the group, like the people and the artists who are going to come, and I think I'll know when that happens. I also look forward to working with those people I've been working with for years and years in a new way, right? When I can hardly wait to come back to Charleston and figure out, meet again in the music, as my dear friend Mark Sturbank says. He says, we'll meet in the music, and I just love that. I love the idea of that and the concept, and to me, that's sacred ground. So I look forward to coming back into that space as a new integrated self and a new being, all of us new beings, to see what happens. I mean, there's the possibilities are endless and limitless. So it's going to be fun to see.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Leah Suárez, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much, Quintin. You take care, be blessed, and stay safe and well.
Likewise.